It was the height of summer in 2004 when Hannah Pierce, a 27-year-old from Portland, Oregon, decided to take a solo trip into Yellowstone National Park. Hannah wasn't reckless. Her friends described her as careful, methodical, and deeply respectful of nature. She had hiked in several national parks before, carried all the right gear, and even kept her family updated with check-in calls whenever she traveled. But on this trip, something was different. She told her mother she felt an unusual pull to explore the less traveled trails of Yellowstone, places most tourists never dared to go. That would be the last time her mother ever heard her voice. Hannah set up camp near a popular trailhead and spoke to a few fellow campers, telling them she planned a short day hike before sunset. Witnesses later recalled her cheerful smile and how excited she was to explore deeper into the park's rugged terrain. But when the sun dipped below the mountains and her campsite remained empty, concern began to grow. Other hikers assumed she had simply extended her trek. By midnight, however, when her tent was still untouched and her car sat exactly where she had parked it, alarm bells rang. The next morning, rangers launched an immediate search. They started with the main trails, expecting to find her injured or lost. Helicopters swept the forest canopy, while ground teams fanned out into the woods calling her name. Trained dogs picked up her scent near a narrow path leading toward a restricted zone. But the trail abruptly ended in the middle of the forest, as if Hannah had stepped off the earth itself. No footprints, no signs of a struggle, nothing but silence. The search widened over the following days. Flyers with Hannah's picture were posted in every ranger station and visitor center. Tourists were interviewed, drivers were questioned, and nearby cabins were inspected, yet not a single person had seen her beyond that first afternoon. Volunteers who joined the search recalled an eerie stillness that seemed to hang over the woods where she had vanished, as though the forest itself was hiding her. Even experienced trackers admitted they had never encountered such a sudden disappearance without some kind of trail. As days turned into weeks, hope began to fade. Hannah's family arrived at Yellowstone, walking the same trails she had, calling her name through the trees, but there was no answer. Her tent remained zipped, her car untouched, her belongings neatly in place, as if she had never even left. But she had left, and somewhere in the endless wilderness of Yellowstone, she was gone. And the deeper investigators looked, the more unsettling the mystery became. Nearly a month after Hannah's disappearance, just when hope had nearly dissolved, a ranger on patrol stumbled upon something unusual in a restricted section of the park. Tucked between two fallen logs, hidden beneath layers of pine needles, was a weathered backpack. When they checked the tags, it was confirmed. It belonged to Hannah Pierce. At first, it seemed like the breakthrough everyone had been waiting for. Searchers rushed to the area, expecting it would finally lead them to her. But instead of providing answers, the backpack only deepened the mystery. Inside, most of Hannah's belongings were still intact. A flashlight, a canteen half filled with water, her hiking journal, and even her wallet. There were no signs of struggle, no tearing, no dirt stains that suggested she had been dragged. The strangest detail, however, was the state of her map. Half of it had been burned, its edges blackened as though someone deliberately tried to destroy it. Why would Hannah, who was meticulous about navigation, burn her own map in the middle of a trip? And if someone else had done it, what were they trying to erase? Even more disturbing was a single page found tucked inside her journal. Unlike her usual neat handwriting and reflective notes about nature, this page bore a dark charcoal sketch. It depicted a circle surrounded by crude stick figures, drawn almost frantically. The figures had elongated arms, some bent into unnatural positions, and at the center of the circle was an unrecognizable shape, something between a symbol and a creature. Her family swore Hannah never drew anything, let alone something so bizarre. Experts later suggested it looked ritualistic. Others said it was simply a hiker's idle doodle. But the unease it carried was undeniable. The backpack's discovery sparked new theories. Some believed Hannah had stumbled upon something she shouldn't have seen. Perhaps a gathering, a hidden ritual, or even an isolated group deep in the forest. If that were true, had she tried to record it in her journal before being silenced? Why was her bag hidden so carefully, as if someone wanted it to eventually be found, but only after enough time had passed? Rangers searched the surrounding area for days, but apart from the backpack, no further evidence appeared. With no body, no footprints, and only the chilling sketch to guide them, the search effort was both reignited and haunted by the implications. Every ranger who handled that backpack felt a creeping sense of dread, as though the bag was less a clue and more a warning. Hannah's disappearance was no longer seen as a simple case of a lost hiker. It had taken a darker turn, one that hinted at forces, human or otherwise, that might be operating in the shadows of Yellowstone. As weeks turned into months, the official search lost momentum. But whispers began to spread among locals and long-time visitors of Yellowstone. The park had always carried an air of mystery. Hundreds of square miles of untouched wilderness, caves and ravines never fully mapped, and legends that went back generations. Hannah's sudden disappearance, paired with the strange discovery of her backpack, poured fuel on those stories. Campers spoke in hushed tones around campfires, telling each other that Yellowstone wasn't just dangerous because of its wildlife or terrain. It was dangerous because of what humans might be doing within it. Some swore that Hannah had stumbled into the territory of a hidden cult. Old rumors resurfaced, tales of strange gatherings deep in the forests, where fires burned late into the night and low, rhythmic chanting echoed between the trees. Several hikers reported hearing distant voices after midnight, voices too organized and patterned to be mistaken for the wind. A few claimed they saw flickering lights moving in places where no campsites were marked. Rangers dismissed these reports as tricks of the mind, but the stories spread quickly, embedding themselves in the local folklore. Others believed Hannah had been drawn into something supernatural. Native legends spoke of sacred grounds within Yellowstone that should never be disturbed, places where spirits walked, and where those who trespassed vanished without a trace. Elders warned of shadowy figures that mimicked human shapes, but were not human at all, guardians of the land, that exacted a heavy price when their boundaries were crossed. The eerie sketch found in Hannah's journal seemed to align with these warnings, as if she had unknowingly recorded what she saw before she disappeared. There were even darker theories. Some locals hinted at an inner circle of individuals, wealthy, powerful people who used the park's isolation for their own secret practices. Stories claimed that every few years, a hiker would vanish without explanation, always brushed off as an accident or wildlife attack. The suggestion was chilling. Hannah was not the first, and she might not be the last. The ritualistic arrangement of bones, which would only be revealed later, seemed to fit this narrative all too perfectly. By the end of that year, Hannah's case had become more than a missing persons investigation. It had become a ghost story told across the region. Tourists came to Yellowstone not only for its beauty, but also to hear about the girl who had vanished, and the backpack with the haunting sketch. The park rangers tried to quiet the rumors, insisting there was no evidence of foul play. But the more they tried to explain, the more people believed they were hiding something. Hannah's absence had transformed into a living legend, and the forest seemed to grow darker with each retelling. After the backpack was found and analyzed, the investigation slowed to a crawl. Weeks passed without a single new lead, and eventually the official search was scaled back. Hannah's family clung to hope, refusing to believe she was gone for good. They held vigils, organized volunteer searches, and begged the authorities not to close her case. But as seasons shifted and Yellowstone's harsh winter set in, the trail grew colder. Snow buried the path she once walked, and with each passing day, the possibility of finding her alive slipped further out of reach. Despite the lack of progress, there was an undeniable heaviness around her disappearance that never went away. Park rangers admitted, in private, that Hannah's case disturbed them more than most. Experienced searchers could usually piece together what had happened to a missing hiker: an animal attack, a fall, or disorientation leading to exposure. But Hannah's vanishing defied all logic. One ranger later confided that it felt less like she had gotten lost and more like she had been taken. The silence stretched on. The media moved on to fresher stories, but among locals, Hannah's name was whispered whenever a tourist wandered too far from marked trails. Her family continued to visit Yellowstone, placing missing person flyers on bulletin boards even a year later, refusing to let her memory fade. Some visitors claimed they saw a young woman's figure standing deep among the trees, watching quietly before vanishing into the shadows. These sightings were never confirmed, but they added to the sense that Hannah's presence lingered in the wilderness, even if her body did not. Law enforcement tried to keep the case open, but with no fresh evidence, it eventually slid into the cold file cabinet. Still, a handful of investigators refused to let it go. They kept Hannah's backpack photos pinned on their walls, especially the page with the disturbing sketch. Something about it gnawed at them. It wasn't just random doodling. It looked like a clue, like Hannah had tried to warn them about what she'd seen before she disappeared. But without proof, they had no choice but to wait. Then, in the dead of winter in 2006, 18 long months after Hannah vanished, fate intervened. A group of hunters exploring an off-limits section of Yellowstone stumbled upon something that would reignite the case in the most horrifying way imaginable. What they found wasn't just evidence of Hannah's fate, it was a revelation that confirmed the darkest rumors whispered about the park. It was late January 2006 when 3 hunters, ignoring park boundaries, pushed further into a snow-covered section of Yellowstone rarely touched by visitors. Their intent was simple: to track elk. But what they stumbled upon was something no one could prepare for. As they entered a narrow ravine, one of the men noticed a faint trail of bones scattered in the snow. At first, they assumed it was animal remains. But when they followed the trail deeper into the gorge, they came across the mouth of a cave, its entrance partially concealed by rocks and branches, as though someone had tried to keep it hidden. Inside that cave, the silence was suffocating, and the hunters immediately felt they had crossed into a place they weren't meant to be. As their flashlights swept across the cavern walls, the hunters froze. Before them lay a chilling sight: a collection of human bones, unmistakably arranged with deliberate precision. This was no accident of nature, no scattering of remains from scavengers. The bones were carefully placed in a perfect circular formation, surrounding a crude stone altar at the center. Melted candle wax streaked the stones, and blackened feathers lay scattered among the bones. What struck them most was the skull. It sat at the heart of the circle, tilted upward, as though forced to stare forever at the cave's ceiling. Panic surged through the hunters. They wanted to leave, but their curiosity kept them rooted for a moment longer. One of them snapped a photograph with a disposable camera he carried, proof that what they were seeing wasn't just a trick of the light. The walls of the cave only added to the horror. Symbols drawn in red covered the stone surface, jagged, looping marks that bore no resemblance to letters or words. Some looked like distorted human figures, others resembled spirals and geometric patterns that seemed to radiate outward from the center of the room. The more the hunters looked, the more it felt less like they had stumbled into a crime scene, and more like they had intruded on an active ritual site. Overwhelmed with fear, the hunters fled the cave, barely able to comprehend what they had seen. When they finally reported their discovery to the authorities, their voices shook as they described the scene. Rangers, skeptical at first, dispatched a team to investigate, but when the officials entered the cave, they confirmed every word. The bones were indeed human, and dental records later proved what the hunters had feared: they belonged to Hannah Pierce. Her remains, carefully arranged, had waited in silence for 18 long months before being uncovered. What baffled investigators most was the condition of the remains. There were no clear signs of an animal attack, no evidence of her simply collapsing from natural causes. Instead, the arrangement suggested intent, deliberate, calculated intent. Someone, or perhaps a group, had taken the time to arrange Hannah's bones in a way that spoke of ritual. The cave was not just a place of death, it was a shrine. And the discovery was only the beginning of the horror to come. Because the cave itself seemed to hold more secrets than anyone was willing to admit. When forensic experts examined the cave more closely, they immediately knew this was unlike any typical missing person recovery. The placement of Hannah's bones had a kind of order to it, as though each piece had been set down with purpose, rather than scattered by time or wildlife. Even the skull, perfectly balanced at the circle's center, showed no signs of natural disturbance. Investigators quietly admitted that whoever arranged the remains had done so with meticulous precision, almost like a ritual performed step by step. This wasn't chaos, it was ceremony. The markings on the cave walls drew even more unease. Analysts first thought the red substance was paint, but testing revealed traces of animal blood mixed with a mineral-based pigment. Some of the symbols resembled obscure occult markings documented in fringe texts from Europe, while others didn't match anything known to scholars. The crude humanoid shapes, drawn with arms bent unnaturally, echoed the stick figures found in Hannah's journal sketch. It was as if her drawing months earlier had been a foreshadowing of the very place where she would be found. Experts debated whether these markings belonged to a local cult, a lone ritualist, or something far older that had simply been rediscovered. Adding to the horror was the evidence of fire. Burnt-out candle stubs littered the cave floor, their wax hardened into thick pools on the stone. The soot on the ceiling suggested repeated burning over many nights. This was not the scene of a single act, it had been revisited, tended to, like an altar maintained over time. Whoever had arranged Hannah's remains had likely come back again and again, perhaps to perform additional ceremonies, perhaps to ensure that the site remained active. It implied not only a ritual but an ongoing devotion to something unknown. For investigators, the most disturbing part was what wasn't there. No footprints remained in the soft earth, no fingerprints on the bones, no discarded tools or clothing. The cave looked carefully cleaned, except for the arrangement itself. Yet small details betrayed recent human activity. The wax was fresh enough not to have decayed completely, and some of the markings were still vibrant, not faded by time. It suggested that whoever had been in that cave hadn't stopped 18 months ago. They had been there recently, maybe even within weeks of the discovery. As word of these findings spread within investigative circles, the theories grew darker. This wasn't a simple case of a hiker who met with an unfortunate end. This was staged, ritualistic, intentional, and deliberate. Hannah Pierce's disappearance no longer looked like an accident or a random crime. It looked like a message, or worse, an offering. And though officials tried to keep these details away from the public, whispers inevitably leaked out, feeding into the already chilling rumors that something in Yellowstone was watching, waiting, and still very much active. Despite months of analysis, investigators could never piece together the full story of what happened to Hannah Pierce. Forensic teams combed through the cave inch by inch, yet no trace of her clothing, no clear signs of how she died, and no evidence pointing to a suspect was ever uncovered. The carefully arranged remains told a story, but one written in a language no one could decipher. Every bone placement, every red symbol, every burnt candle seemed to suggest intent, but intent without identity, without someone to blame. Hannah's case dissolved into one of the most chilling mysteries ever tied to Yellowstone. Theories ran wild. Some believed Hannah had fallen victim to a secret cult that operated in the park, a group that preyed on the lost and isolated, carrying out rituals hidden in the vast wilderness. Others suggested she had stumbled upon the wrong place at the wrong time, an ancient site of worship, where forces older than history demanded her sacrifice. Even respected experts, who usually dismissed superstition, admitted the sheer precision of the bone arrangement was unlike anything seen in conventional criminal cases. The mystery was not just unsolved, it was unexplainable. Hannah's family, desperate for closure, pressed authorities for answers, but officials grew increasingly guarded. Certain details, like the freshness of the wax, or the fact that some markings looked recently reapplied, were kept out of public reports. This secrecy only fueled suspicion that the government knew more than it was admitting. Why hide evidence unless the truth was too disturbing to release? Some locals claimed rangers were warned not to speak about what was really found in the cave, as if the park's reputation mattered more than the life that had been lost. What unsettled everyone most was the possibility that Hannah's killer, or killers, were still out there, walking freely among the forests and mountains. Some visitors reported being watched while hiking, catching glimpses of figures just beyond the tree line. Others swore they heard faint chanting at night, echoing across valleys where no campsites existed. Each new rumor, whether exaggerated or not, wove itself into Hannah's story, ensuring that her case was never seen as a closed chapter, but rather as an open wound in Yellowstone's history. To this day, the cave remains sealed off, its exact location kept secret by park officials. Officially, the case is labeled as an unresolved homicide, but those who knew the truth admit it feels like something far more sinister. Hannah Pierce did not simply vanish into the wilderness. Her death carried with it a message, one written in bones, wax, and blood. And whatever that message was, it has yet to be fully understood. So in the end, what really happened to Hannah Pierce inside the vast, unforgiving wilderness of Yellowstone? Was she the victim of a hidden cult operating in the shadows, or did she stumble onto something far older, something that demanded a ritual sacrifice no one alive can fully explain? Her case remains unsolved, her cave sealed, and her story whispered in the same breath as Yellowstone's darkest legends. And perhaps the most haunting thought of all is this: if Hannah's remains were found arranged so deliberately, it means someone, or something, took the time to place them there. Which raises one final question that still lingers to this day: if the ritual was completed with Hannah, then who, or what, is it waiting for next?
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.